MPT to serve all of our diverse communities and is made possible by the generous support of our members. Thank you. Live from Maryland Public Television, this is Direct Connection with Jeff Salkin.
Good evening. Welcome to Direct Connection. We had promoted tonight a live interview with Brandon Scott, winner of the Democratic primary for mayor of Baltimore. However, Mr. Scott does remain the president of the city council, which is holding a hearing which is running long, and he may not be able to join us. So for the moment, we're going to move ahead and start with our health segment and a look at how the medical community is discussing very difficult issues of race. Joining us for our Your Health segment are Donna Jacobs, Senior Vice President of the University of Maryland Medical System, and Dana Cunningham, Faculty Consultant at the National Center for School Mental Health at the University of Maryland School of Medicine. Ladies, thanks for being with us. This has been a very trying time for a lot of people, a lot of health disparities that maybe were under the surface in terms of communities of color have suddenly become very evident with the coronavirus, and whose effective policing inequalities very evident in the last couple of weeks. University of Maryland Medical System is holding an event this week. Ms. Jacobs, tell us about that.
Well, Jeff, first, thank you for having us both. And you're right, on Tuesday and Thursday at 3 p.m. of this week, we are hosting a mental health mini-series on mental health and racism and racial trauma in our community, which has been certainly exacerbated by the overlay of COVID that we've been dealing with for the past several months. So it's a webinar that's accessible to anyone, and it really is open to all communities because we are all impacted by what's going on currently and the high incidence of racial trauma that we've been witnessing, and as well the isolation that so many of us are feeling. There would be ways that we might otherwise soothe ourselves or deal with these issues, but we're not even able to see and talk to our loved ones these days. So it's been even more difficult than it might otherwise be.
Dr. Cunningham, how do these issues, racism, racial trauma, racial tensions, how do they factor into what you do, into the world of healthcare?
Yeah, they're very critical to really take a look at in terms of healthcare, because we know that when people experience racism, experience discrimination, that definitely has an impact on their health and mental health. You know, we see heightened rates oftentimes of depression, anxiety, rage, anger, just general emotional distress. And that's on the individual side, but also, you know, certainly looking at the larger system. You know, our health system has definitely been impacted by racism and discrimination from a structural standpoint. And we think about access to care. I think, you know, the COVID has certainly highlighted many of those inequities in terms of ability to access care in such a trying time.
And Ms. Jacobs, a lot of the underlying issues in the health disparities. We've done other interviews in the past couple of weeks talking about people maybe have pre-existing conditions, less access to ongoing health care, maybe live in a multi-generational home, a smaller home. There's not much you can do about that, you know, within 24 hours, but you can make sure that anybody coming in for treatment at any institution of the University of Maryland Medical System is going to get the best treatment.
Oh, absolutely. And we speak all the time about how important it is that people not only attend to the issues that are impacting them now related to COVID and what you say about living in more crowded homes and just contracting the disease, but we also know that there are many people who have been afraid to come into the hospital to get the care that they would otherwise get when they know that there's an emergent situation. So we've really been stressing, do not put off care. The hospitals are safe and ready and available to care for you beyond COVID. And if you delay care, you might create a situation for yourself that's worse over time. And please don't do that.
Dr. Cunningham, the first part of this event focuses on adults. The second part, families and kids. That's your specialty. Let's look at it from that perspective. What do parents and grandparents need to know about maybe how all of these things swirling around at the moment might be affecting youngsters in their household?
Sure, that's a great question. I think, first of all, parents and adults have to be aware of their own emotional reactions and what they are displaying and showing. And we know that kids pick up on just about everything that they see other people doing and saying. And so, if a parent is feeling anxious, is feeling depressed, definitely addressing that. But also talking to their children about what they're experiencing. And if they are crying, if they are a little more anxious than usual, if they are upset, explaining to their kids in age appropriate language what's happening in our society. I think, one of the things that has happened more recently is that for far too long, there's just sort of been blinders when it comes to discussing issues related to race and discrimination. But I think having honest conversations with kids about fairness, unfairness, thinking about how they can support their friends and kind of be allies with related to this movement, discussing issues related to justice and injustice, and sharing. This is a good opportunity to share about our country's history and talk about the history of racism, of slavery, of white superiority in this country, and explain those things to kids so they have a better understanding of what's happening.
To put a fine
Let me
point on
ask you
what
about,
Dana,
please.
to put a fine point on what Dana said, I think that dialogue is critically important. If you don't have it, as she said, children will internalize what they see their parents and adults experiencing. And they are asking. I can tell you from the experiences I know of many friends, their 6 and 7 and 8-year-old children are asking what's happening in the US, and is what's happened, say, to Mr. Floyd going to happen to me. So they need to hear from parents in a calm way that really does answer and address the questions that they have, because we need to put their minds at ease as best we can while making them aware of what's going on.
So, Ms. Jacobs, the event, 2 events you're putting on this week, who are they for? Can anybody watching sign up, and how do they do it?
Yes, so you'd go to www.ums.org/notallwounds, and it is part of our ongoing mental health series. It is for everyone. We've had quite a number of people sign up already. It's a community conversation. This is not a session. These are not sessions for professionals, but rather for lay people to be able to speak with professionals about the issues and the things that are on their minds. So it is for everyone. It's for all communities, not just communities of color, because we're all confronting the issues that we see repeatedly now in media, social media, etc.
Let me ask both of you the idea of implicit bias. What does it mean to you, and how would you like everybody out there, any racial background, to think about that?
Well, I find that we're at a point right now where people are asking, what role do I play in all of this? And I think that that's an important question. People are trying to understand how they are perceived, for instance, whether not just people of color, but Caucasians and others, wondering what might I have said or might I have done that has been offensive? And it's an important question for everybody. Implicit bias may be something you may not be aware of, or it may be intentional, may be unintentional, and there may be comments that you make that are not perceived well by others. We all have biases, and the idea of implicit bias is to help us understand what those biases might be and how we address the comments, the actions that we do moving forward.
Yeah, so those implicit bias is really those unconscious, quick associations we make between things or people. So they could be positive, they could also be certainly negative. And thinking about those associations, but they're shaped usually by stereotypes and misinformation. And oftentimes we see them come more to light when people are under stress or have to make quick decisions, and those implicit biases kick right in pretty quickly. And so, although they are learned over time, they can also be unlearned and unassociated, but it definitely takes time and takes some effort to do that work.
With your background in child and adolescent psychology, you spent a lot of time working in schools with school systems. You know, we like to hope that the next generation is going to be better, and the generation after that, maybe not perfect, but an improvement still. When you see young people, when you work with young people, are they less at risk? Are they coming from a healthier background than maybe previous generations?
You know, I have a lot of hope for our younger generation. We've seen, just incredible acts of resilience and support supporting their fellow students and just kind of having a different lens on their outlook on life. But as I said, a lot of our young people's ideas are shaped by their environment as well. So there are also youth who still have very pretty strict ideas about different races and ethnicities and what is or isn't proper or kind of how things should go. So while we have work to do, I still am very hopeful and optimistic about our young people and the upcoming generation. We've seen so many of them leading protests and taking active roles in their community to start petitions, to start change and advocate for change, which has been really awesome to see.
And Ms. Jacobs, before we go, again, let's give the web address, which is UMS and obviously University of Maryland Medical System.
UMS.org, UMS.org/notallwounds, WONDS.
Very good. Donna Jacobs, University of Maryland Medical System. Dr. Dana Cunningham, University of Maryland School of Medicine. Ladies, thanks to both of you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you so much.
And we'll be back right after this.
Can you tell us what you know?
Turning back now to the race for the White House.
The State Board of Elections voted Thursday to set up a new election.
It must be a very emotional day.
The world changed in the blink of an eye.
Children are at the heart of this story.
Drop your phone and just be in the moment.
You guys ready?
It's a thrill to see images of a new world for the first time.
I want to look back and say, I learned something. That is where transformation happens.
I see people cry on this show, and I'm like, what y'all doing, man?
Out of the water came this giant thing.
That's incredible.
I feel it in my bones. It's so totally amazing.
They hear that song and they're like, that's my story.
I have chills.
All of the joys, all of the sorrows.
This is where it comes from.
The rest is history.
Our job is the truth.
I'm a journalist.
My destiny is to rule this country.
I will not run away.
Yes, Mom.
It's very exciting.
Lord, I'm getting tired of being so lonely. I've got the fire inside that burns more than it lies.
Sir, are you a gentleman?
How dare he?
I'm a strong woman and I've got my own. I'm in control. I need somebody to hold.
I refuse to be tamed. Kiss me. It's terribly hot, isn't it?
No?
Please be mine again.
No.
That city council hearing continues, but one of the other members of the council, 9th District Councilman John Bullock, joined us for our most recent political roundtable. Joining us for the political roundtable this week are John Bullock, a Baltimore City Council member who just won his primary and has no general election opponent. Also joining us is John Deedy, a CCBC political science professor. Note that Mr. Bullock is also a political science professor. Thank you for being with us. I'll start with Mr. Bullock with your elected official hat on. And first, congratulations. Second, there's going to be a lot of turnover in City Hall. Were voters sending a message? What did you hear from voters when you were out campaigning?
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity, and I appreciate the congratulations. Yes, there is turnover going to be at City Hall. Again, we're looking at a new mayor, a new council president, a new comptroller, and 5 new members of the city council. Our time for campaigning and canvassing was cut short, obviously, due to COVID-19. But I will say that as we got into March, some of the things we were hearing was that there were some issues of distrust. There were some desires for change in leadership. And you definitely saw that. So again, we had an incumbent mayor who was dealing with a crisis, but at the same time, there were folks who were looking for new ideas, and it came to a very close race between a previous mayor and a current city council president. On the side of the comptroller was very interesting because you had an incumbent who had been there for over 20 some odd years, who had now been replaced by a long-term council member who talked also about accountability. And then in the council president's race, you had a very spirited competition for an open seat with 2 current members of the council, a current state delegate, who was then able to pull out a victory in that.
Mr. Deedy, your perspective, what were the voters saying?
I think the voters were saying an expression I've heard a lot of times: a new broom sweeps clean. And I think that people saw the leadership that was currently there as rather stagnant. They had been around for a while, but they weren't seeing a lot of results. And I think people wanted some sort of change, and going for someone like Brandon Scott, who's much younger than a lot of the candidates, I really think benefited him. And I think people are looking for Baltimore to move forward.
So, Mr. Deedy, we're going to have a 36-year-old mayor, and finishing up your first term on the council, you're going to be one of the senior people.
That's rather interesting because Brandon Scott has been in office for about 10 years. So he does know what's going on. And I think the other aspect when you think about Brandon Scott and his experiences, when he ran for office, he made one thing very clear: I'm running to take power away from the mayor's office. And I think that resonated with a lot of people because people always associate elected leaders like they're looking to enhance their power and to do more stuff with their power, but he's actually trying to take some power away. And I think that was rather appealing to voters. I think that voters, I think the thing that helped him a lot was the weekend before the primary, when there was a lot of people out in the streets protesting. He wasn't home. He was out in the streets talking to people. And I think that resonated with a lot of people. He wasn't in a bunker. He was out there.
Yeah, I think you make a lot of good points. One thing I am, pretty excited about serving with Mayor Scott and a comptroller Henry and a city council president Mosby. Again, you see this leadership change. But back in 2016, I was first elected. There were 8 new council members who came in, and that was a majority of the council. And now going to the second term, having 5 new members is going to be really interesting. So we start looking at, at things in terms of, as you mentioned, the Board of Estimates. And so you have an incoming mayor who has talked about trying to reduce the mayor's power there and thinking about what those 3 individuals do in terms of the Board of Estimates. But then also as it relates to the city council, what it means in terms of, who's leading committees, what type of leadership is coming forth. And again, thinking about the time period that we're in. You mentioned, what was happening in the weekend prior to the election, and what's happening now as it relates to issues of policing, but also about transparency and the priorities of the city budget. So it's going to be a very interesting time moving forward in this juncture.
Well, let's spend just a minute on the election process. We had a mail-in vote for the most part because of the coronavirus. We had long lines of people waiting to vote at the polling places that were open. The assumption has always been that mail-in voting will increase turnout. Increased turnout is good for Democrats, not really an issue in Baltimore City. What do you take away from what happened in terms of the process?
It was really interesting. I mean, on the candidate side, again, everything that we've done before is out the window. So again, if we're talking about knocking on doors late in the election, we're talking about even what the strategy is moving on to election day, it's a challenge. But also it meant that candidates had to make sure that they had a strong effort as it related to things like phone banking and mail and contacting voters through social media. And the successful campaigns were the ones that were able to do it. Now, thinking about turnout, it was actually very encouraging that we had such a high rate of turnout. Some of us were concerned in terms of what it would be like, but it's also encouraging to see a number of first-time voters. The fact that so many ballots were sent out, so many first-time voters or voters who weren't engaged previously had participated. This bodes well for the future.
Mr. Deedy?
When I think about this, I think we need to talk about an important aspect. It was great that turnout was up, but the fact that Linda Lamone and Armstead Jones really messed this thing up. That's one way to describe it. This was a cluster disaster. The fact that Mr. Jones was asleep at home on election night is appalling. And I really think that instead of having a fancy investigation, I think some of the leaders in Baltimore, such as Bill Ferguson, who represents District 1, where there are a lot of problems, they need to do more. They need to basically remove Linda Lamone from her position. And they also need to do something to fix the election system, because this is democracy at stake. People have to trust the system. And if they feel like it takes a week for election ballots to be counted, it creates distrust. And this is something that Vladimir Putin has been very good at. And we don't want to have this type of situation where people become more cynical in the process, don't choose to get involved because they believe, oh yeah, they kept counting the ballots and they stopped when Brandon had the lead. I think this is a very important thing, and I think the state really needs to look into doing something about this.
We do need to move on here, but I'll just point out I'm really glad that there's paper, there's an audit trail, an old-fashioned audit trail for this stuff. We should talk about the protests over the police killing of George Floyd. If there's any good news in Baltimore, it's that the protests were not really violent, and I wonder if that's because maybe Baltimore, Mr. Bullock first, is ahead of the curve for unfortunate reasons, but for the last several years has been aggressively reforming the police.
Exactly. Unfortunately, our city went through a very trying time 5 years ago, but there were a lot of lessons learned out of that experience. And so, again, we've dealt with our challenges here on the local level and as it relates to communities and policing and trying to rebuild trust, and then also things like the consent decree. But yes, you saw also that even when there were attempts from those who were not from Baltimore to try to make it into a violent situation, that there were calmer heads here in Baltimore having been through this before. And so, again, I think we're in many ways a model to the rest of the nation, because you look at New York, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., look at all along Eastern Seaboard, other places that this vitriol is now spiked into violence. And so, unfortunately, we've had our challenges in Baltimore, but it's one thing that we're able to lead on. And again, I think that the opportunity is ahead of us to have these conversations as it relates to policing, what that looks like in communities, and then rebuilding trust.
Mr. Deedy, I want to get you in on that, but I'll also point out that the other obvious thing when you just looked at the footage of the protests was it was a diverse group. It was a really diverse group. What does that say to you?
So when you say diversity, I look at diversity not only in terms of race, but also age. So you had young people who were, leading some of these efforts, which was truly inspiring. And it really says a lot about this future generation, because now it was very much multiracial. And in some of these instances, there were less people of color and other folks who are now allies who are coming out. And again, it was something that really speaks volumes, not only to what's happening in Baltimore, but what's happening nationwide. So again, this is something that is very encouraging. I will say one challenge, thinking about where we are health-wise, is looking at COVID-19 and if this results in any spikes. So it's another thing to be thinking about in terms of the lack of social distancing with some of the protests.
Mr. Deedy?
Yeah, when I look at it, I was very impressed with the fact that at least during a lot of the protests, people were wearing masks and doing the best they could. I think the diversity of the protest was very positive. And I think it also did one other thing. It's re-energized, and I'll explain that, the Black Lives Matters movement, as far as now people understand it better than they did 5 years ago. And I think the fact that you saw video that's there forever of this man being murdered with the choke that was placed on him on his neck, I think it made people think twice about a lot of things. And I think it made a lot of people in suburban communities, people like me, look at that video and also say, that could have been me. And I really think it's going to make people re-examine police departments across the country, get better into community policing. We want to be able to trust our police department, and videos like this don't help.
I'm out of time, but Mr. Bullock, do you know if chokeholds are illegal for the local police?
I mean, it definitely should be. Now, one of the things to think about in terms of as Baltimore is that we also have a city police force that's also controlled by the state. So there are some limitations in terms of what we at the local level can do, but it's something we need to be looking at. But again, we've seen this throughout the nation, and hopefully we're having legislation from a national level that really pushes down on this. And I'd be remiss to say that, again, representing West Baltimore, we've had our share of incidents, and this is something that we need to be thinking about.
For information on our upcoming guests, remember to visit us online on Twitter at MPT News. Now, for all of us at MPT, I'm Jeff Salkin. Thanks for watching, and have a good night.
Your health segments are a co-production of Maryland Public Television and the University of Maryland Medical System.
This program was made by MPT to serve all of our diverse communities.